They say every family has its golden child, and ours was no exception. From the moment she entered a room, the world seemed to rearrange itself around her smile. Effortless, radiant, intoxicating. I used to think her light made us all shine, until I realized it only cast longer shadows. Ours was the picture of perfection. Laughter over Sunday dinners, matching sweaters on holidays, parents who spoke in soft, practiced tones about success and unity. But beneath that harmony lived something quieter, a rhythm only I could hear. It was the sound of comparison, of measuring up, of being loved with conditions. That night, as the family toasted her latest award, I watched the reflection of their joy ripple across crystal glasses and wondered if anyone saw me at all. It was always her, first in school, first in life, first in their hearts. I tried not to mind, telling myself love wasn't a competition, but in our home, it always was. Every compliment for her felt like an absence for me. She didn't have to try. She just existed, effortlessly adored. I learned to fade quietly, to make my kindness smaller, my achievements quieter. That night, while she basked in their praise, I excused myself and stepped outside. The air was colder than I remembered. Still, sharp, unfiltered. I could hear them laughing through the window, and in that laughter, something inside me cracked. Not from envy, but from knowing I'd never be enough for people who only loved reflections of themselves. When people ask about happy families, I smile and nod. I know what they expect. The picture-perfect image, the curated warmth. But truth is quieter. It hides between glances, beneath jokes, in the pauses between sentences. Sometimes love isn't loud, it's selective. I used to think if I tried harder, they'd see me too. But love given out of guilt isn't love at all. It's performance. And I was never good at pretending. It happened so gradually I didn't notice when admiration turned to resentment. Every conversation became a comparison. Her success, my silence. I started to wonder if maybe they needed a villain in their perfect story, and I was convenient enough to play the part. Sometimes I caught her watching me, a slight smirk on her lips, as if she already knew how this story would end. They say betrayal never comes from enemies, only from those you trust the most. I didn't know it yet. But the cracks in our perfect family were already spreading. All it would take was one lie, one whisper, to shatter everything. And when it came, it would come from the person I loved the most. It started with a whisper, small, fragile, and poisonous. I didn't hear it directly. I felt it. The shift in their voices when I entered the room, the way their smiles turned hesitant, their eyes darting elsewhere. I told myself I was imagining it, that families didn't change overnight. But silence has a way of revealing the truth. The warmth in our home cooled into politeness, then suspicion. I caught Claire watching me again, but this time her smile wasn't smug. It was satisfied. I didn't know what she'd said, only that it was enough to unmake me. By the time I learned what she'd said, it was too late. A rumor about money missing from my father's company, accounts I'd helped manage during college. Claire told them she'd seen me transfer funds, that I'd confessed in tears. None of it was true. But she cried when she told it. And in our family, tears from her were treated as proof. My father's disappointment felt heavier than anger. My mother didn't ask a single question. It wasn't about truth. It was about image, and I had just become their stain. I tried explaining, but every word fell into a void. Their eyes no longer saw me as daughter, sister. Just accusation made flesh. I watched my mother turn away first, her silence sharper than any insult. My father followed with measured disappointment. But Claire, she looked at me the way an artist looks at a finished masterpiece. I realized then that her story had replaced me. In their hearts, I was already gone. The day they told me to leave, I didn't fight. I packed what I could. Clothes, old journals, a photograph of us from years ago before everything went sour. I stood by the door waiting for someone to stop me, to say they believed me, but no one did. My mother couldn't meet my eyes. My father handed me an envelope. No words, just money. Claire hugged me, whispered, "I hope you find peace." Her perfume lingered like poison. I stepped outside, and for the first time, our perfect home looked like a stranger's house. I walked until I couldn't feel my hands. The night air was heavy, my breath fogging under the streetlights. I kept thinking of all the times I'd defended her, how I believed family meant truth, not performance. Maybe I was naive. Maybe love is just a story we tell until it stops being convenient. Somewhere behind me, laughter echoed, faint, familiar. I didn't look back. I couldn't, because looking back would mean accepting that they'd chosen her, lie over my life. Silence became my only companion. It filled my apartment, my mornings, my sleepless nights. There's a strange kind of peace in losing everything. When there's nothing left to defend, even pain feels honest. I found work at a small cafe on the other side of town. People came and went, their stories spilling between cups of coffee, and no one knew mine. I liked it that way. Every day, I watched strangers laugh, argue, fall in love. All the little things I once thought were permanent. And though the ache in my chest never left, it began to change shape, becoming something quieter, steadier. Maybe survival isn't about healing. Maybe it's just learning to breathe again. I kept their numbers saved, though I never called. Sometimes I'd scroll through old photos, pausing on smiles that no longer felt real. Claire's face was everywhere. On magazine covers, social feeds, charity events. The golden girl, adored by strangers just as she'd been by them. I told myself I didn't care, but every time her face appeared, my chest tightened. It wasn't jealousy anymore. It was mourning. For the life I lost, for the version of myself that still wanted their approval. Time softened the sharpness of betrayal but never erased it. Some mornings I'd forget for a moment, until I caught my reflection and remembered who I'd become. Evelyn was the only one who saw through my silence. She didn't ask for explanations, she just showed up. We'd share cheap coffee and talk about anything but the past. It wasn't much, but in her laughter, I started to feel something close to normal again. Maybe that's how healing starts. Not with forgiveness, but with someone reminding you that you still exist. Months passed and life found a rhythm again. Then one morning, as I unlocked the cafe, I overheard two customers whispering about a scandal. Something about a charity fund mismanaged by a young woman named Claire. My heart stilled. They spoke in low voices, half curiosity, half pity. I didn't react, but my hands trembled as I made their coffee. The universe has a way of circling back, even when we stop asking it to. I didn't know what the truth was yet, but for the first time in years, the silence felt heavy with possibility. That night, I searched her name again. Dozens of articles, photos, videos, all showing the same woman I once called sister. But this time, the smile looked forced, the eyes unsure. The empire she'd built on lies was beginning to crumble. And part of me wanted to look away. But another part, the one she'd tried to erase, watched in silence. Not with vengeance, with recognition. Because in her downfall, I saw the truth we'd both been living with. No lie lasts forever. Rumors spread faster than truth ever could. At first, I thought it was another story, a misunderstanding, the way people twist anything for drama. But then, even the news anchors couldn't hide the tone in their voices. Claire's name, once spoken with admiration, now came with a question mark. Her charity's finances were under investigation, donations unaccounted for, statements contradicting each other. The same headlines that once crowned her a beacon of grace now called her a figure of controversy. I watched the footage silently. coffee cooling in my hands, feeling nothing and everything at once. Karma doesn't knock. It just walks in when you least expect it. I should felt vindicated, but I didn't. There was no joy in watching someone self-destruct, even someone who destroyed you. Still, I couldn't deny the strange calm that came with knowing the world was finally seeing what I'd always known. My parents, once proud and untouchable, vanished from social media, their names whispered in shame. For years I had begged them to see me. Now they couldn't bear to be seen at all. A week later I saw her again, not in person, but close enough. She looked smaller, almost human, sitting across from a reporter who kept pressing questions she couldn't answer. Her voice trembled, the same voice that once bent the truth with such grace. The world that adored her now wanted her apologies. For years, I dreamed of that moment, her being exposed. But watching it, all I felt was pity. Maybe that's the cruelest kind of justice. Not triumph, but indifference. The calls started soon after. Unknown numbers. Voicemails I didn't listen to. But one message slipped through. My mother's voice, trembling, saying my name as if she'd forgotten how it felt. She didn't apologize. She didn't have to. The silence between her words carried everything she couldn't say. Part of me wanted to call back, to ask if she finally saw what her perfection had cost us. But I didn't. Not yet. Not yet. Sometimes silence is the only language that fits the damage. Word spread that Claire had lost her sponsors, her reputation shredded by the same spotlight that once crowned her. The family name was now a whisper. People avoided. I thought about how much they'd cared about appearances, how easily they traded truth for pride. And now that pride had eaten them alive. I didn't need revenge. I had time, and time had done what I couldn't. For the first time since the night they cast me out, I felt free. The truth came out the way all secrets do, violently, without warning. One morning, headlines flooded every screen. Charity director accused of fraud and manipulation. It wasn't just money. It was people. Donors misled, records forged, lives ruined. The same charm that once disarmed everyone had become evidence against her. For years I had begged them to see the truth. Now it was impossible to look away. Watching it unfold, I felt like a ghost drifting through justice I never asked for. Because the truth doesn't heal, it exposes. And sometimes, exposure burns everyone who stood too close to the lie. They called it the fall of the perfect family. Reporters camped outside their house, drones circling the gates. My parents, once hosts of charity galas and holiday spreads, now hid behind drawn curtains. The same neighbors who'd praised them crossed the street to avoid eye contact. It was surreal. The empire they built on appearances crumbling under the weight of truth. I wondered if they remembered me in those moments, the daughter they erased for the sake of their reputation. Maybe this was the universe's cruel symmetry, the lie that destroyed me now eating them alive. The phone rang again. This time, a voice I hadn't heard in years. My father. His words were measured, but I could hear the crack beneath the surface. He said they'd made mistakes. That family should forgive. That Claire was just lost. I listened in silence, the same way they once listened to me when they'd already made up their minds. There was a part of me that wanted to scream. You chose her lie over my life. But instead I let the silence stretch, heavy and deliberate. Then I whispered, "Now you know how it feels." In one of the reports they mentioned a man, Daniel. I remembered him from years ago, Claire's ex, the one she'd left when he stopped fitting her narrative. He was the whistleblower. He'd found forged documents, testimonies, all the proof no one had dared to question before. He didn't do it for revenge. He did it for truth. Watching his interview, I felt something unfamiliar. Relief. Not because she'd fallen, but because someone else had finally seen her the way I always did. It felt like the world was finally catching up to the truth I'd lived alone for years. Days later, I stood outside their house. Reporters had left, the chaos replaced by eerie quiet. Curtains drawn, driveway empty, the stage finally bare. I didn't knock. I just stood there, remembering every word, every look, every dismissal. The house felt smaller now, almost fragile. I whispered goodbye, not to them but to the part of me that still wanted them back. For years, I carried their absence like a wound. Now, I was ready to let it scar. Some stories don't need revenge. They just need closure. It was strange hearing from them again. The same voices that once banished me, now trembling with regret. The message was simple. "We would like to see you." I didn't answer right away. For days, I let the silence stretch between us, tasting the weight of what they'd done. But closure has a pull stronger than resentment. So one Sunday afternoon, I took the train back to the town I'd sworn I'd never see again. The houses looked smaller, the streets quieter, as if time itself had exhaled. I wasn't the same person they threw out. I wasn't the broken girl who begged to be believed. I was the ghost of their guilt, walking back home. When I arrived, the house looked older, smaller, lonelier. The gate creaked like it remembered my leaving. My father opened the door, slower this time, his eyes dimmed by something more than age. My mother stood behind him, pale, hesitant. There were no rehearsed smiles, no small talk to cover the awkwardness. Just three people, bound by blood and broken by pride. For a long moment, no one spoke. Then my mother whispered, "We were wrong." I wanted to feel relief, or anger, or anything at all, but instead, I felt nothing, just the quiet ache of time lost. Inside, everything was the same. The framed photos, the scent of old perfume, the hum of the grandfather clock. But the warmth was gone. My father tried to explain, saying they believed what they saw, not what they felt. My mother cried quietly beside him. And when I asked about Claire, they said she'd gone. Moved out, changed her number, vanished into the noise she created. For the first time, I didn't care where she was. I realized I didn't need her downfall to define my peace. I had already reclaimed it the moment I stopped needing their apology. I didn't stay long. Forgiveness isn't always about staying. Sometimes it's about leaving without bitterness. As I stood by the door, my mother reached for my hand. Her grip was trembling, desperate, like someone clinging to what's already gone. "Can you ever forgive us?" she asked. I looked into her eyes and saw the woman who once turned away from me, now smaller, humble. "I already did," I said. "You just weren't here to see it." And in that moment, the silence between us finally felt lighter. When I walked away from that house again, I didn't feel anger. Just peace. Fragile, unfamiliar, but real. The sun broke through the clouds, spilling light across the cracked driveway. For years, I believed closure came from justice. From them admitting their mistake. But I was wrong. Closure came from understanding I didn't need them to heal. I had already rebuilt myself from the ashes of their silence. I was no longer the forgotten daughter. I was the proof that truth survives, even when love doesn't. Weeks passed before I heard her name again. A message arrived one morning, unsigned, desperate. It was Claire. She'd written from another city. A few lines filled with guilt and confusion, asking if I hated her. I read it twice, tracing the words like old scars. Hate? No. I had carried that weight long enough, and it had only kept me chained to her shadow. Maybe she wanted forgiveness to quiet her own conscience. But forgiveness isn't a gift you ask for. It's something earned through silence, through time. I didn't reply. I folded the letter, tucked it away, and whispered to the wind, "I forgive you, but I'm done carrying you." Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if I'd fought harder, screamed louder, forced them to listen back then. But the truth is, no one hears you until they're ready to. The younger me wanted revenge, wanted them to feel my pain. But pain isn't something you can trade. It's something you outgrow. I learned that revenge doesn't heal the wound. It feeds it, so I let it starve. I started writing again. Stories, small pieces of my heart stitched into words. Each one felt like taking back another piece of myself they'd once buried under shame. One night, I walked by the river where I used to sit as a teenager, dreaming of escape. The city shimmered in the distance, reflections bending across the water. I realized then that healing isn't a single moment. It's a series of quiet choices. Choosing peace over pride, truth over illusion, myself over their love. The world moved on, and so did I. The ghosts of my family's betrayal still lingered somewhere in the back of my mind, but they no longer haunted me. They were simply lessons written in blood and silence. Evelyn once told me that sometimes forgiveness isn't for them, it's for you. I finally understood what she meant. I stopped asking, "Why me?" and started asking, "What now?" My life wasn't defined by what they took, but by what I rebuilt. Every morning I woke up, I chose not to be bitter. Every breath was proof that truth endured. I had walked through the fire, and somehow I hadn't just survived, I'd changed. The girl they threw away no longer existed. What remained was something quieter, stronger, unbreakable. They say truth sets you free, but that's only half the story. It doesn't erase the pain. It just teaches you to live with it differently. I never got my family back, not the way I wanted, but I got something better. Peace. The kind that doesn't depend on anyone believing your side. The kind that comes from knowing who you are when no one's looking. As I walked home that evening, the sky burned orange over the city. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like someone's daughter or victim, just myself. And that was enough.